He came home early to surprise his twins, but the woman holding them wasn't his wife. And when he opened a 2-year-old envelope that night, he realized his children had been stolen in plain sight. He had built his life on control, on numbers, on decisions that never shook his hands. But nothing in his powerful world prepared him for the moment he opened his children's nursery door. Because the woman holding his twins was not their mother, and she was crying like they were her own. Ethan Caldwell came home earlier than planned that evening. The drive from Manhattan to Greenwich had been long, but successful. His company had just secured a deal that would put his name on the front pages of every business journal in the country. Normally, that kind of victory would have filled him with pride. But as he stepped out of his black sedan and looked at the wide stone steps of his estate, he felt something quieter inside him, a simple desire to see his children before they fell asleep. The Caldwell mansion stood tall and silent, its large windows glowing warmly against the cold November sky. Everything about it spoke of money, legacy, and order. Inside, the marble floors shined under soft golden lights. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh flowers. It was the kind of home that looked perfect from every angle. Too perfect. Ethan loosened his tie as he walked through the hallway. He expected to hear Victoria's voice on the phone, speaking about donors or charity boards. He expected the nanny's soft footsteps or the sound of the television from the sitting room. Instead, he heard a lullaby. It was soft and gentle, not professional or polished. It sounded like a song someone sings when they love the person they are holding. Ethan slowed his steps. The sound was coming from upstairs. He climbed the staircase quietly, his hand sliding along the smooth wooden railing. The nursery door was slightly open, and warm light spilled into the hallway. When he looked inside, his body went still. Marisol Rivera stood near the rocking chair. She wore her usual navy cleaning uniform, simple and neat. Her dark hair had come loose from its tight bun and rested softly against her shoulders. In her arms were Oliver and Olivia, his 5-month-old twins. One rested against her chest, the other tucked carefully in her arm. She was swaying slowly, humming under her breath. Tears were falling down her cheeks. "It's okay," she whispered to the babies. "I'm here. I've got you." The words were not part of a job. They were personal. Protective. Ethan felt something sharp move through his chest. "What exactly is going on?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Marisol turned quickly, startled. She did not drop the children or step away in panic. Instead, she held them more securely before answering. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "I didn't know you were home." "That's obvious," he replied. His eyes moved from her face to the twins resting peacefully against her. "Put them down." There was a small pause before she obeyed. It wasn't defiance, but it wasn't instant either. Carefully, she walked to the cribs and placed each baby down gently. She adjusted their blankets and brushed her fingers lightly across Oliver's tiny hand. The twins were calm now, their breathing slow and even. Ethan noticed that. "Where is my wife?" he asked. Marisol stepped back from the crib. "She left earlier this afternoon." "For what?" "A fundraiser dinner, I believe." "And the nanny?" "She left at 5. Ethan glanced at the clock. It was almost 8. "So my children were alone?" "No," Marisol said quickly but respectfully. "I was downstairs cleaning. I heard them crying for a long time. I couldn't ignore it." "You were hired to clean," Ethan said evenly, "not to make parenting decisions." Marisol lowered her eyes, but when she spoke again, her voice carried quiet strength. "They were scared," she said. "Babies cry differently when they feel alone." The sentence stayed in the air between them. Ethan stepped closer, studying her face. "And you would know that how?" For a moment, her expression changed. Something painful passed through her eyes, like a memory she didn't want to revisit. "I just know," she answered softly. His phone vibrated in his pocket. "Victoria." He stepped into the hallway to answer. "Ethan, you're home already?" Victoria's voice sounded bright and distracted. Music and conversation echoed behind her. "The fundraiser is going beautifully. You should see who's here." The twins were crying, he said. "Well, that's what babies do," she replied lightly. Marisol was there, wasn't she? That's why we have staff. The word staff felt cold. He ended the call without arguing. When he returned to the nursery, Marisol was standing near the window, gently pulling the curtains closed. The twins were asleep now. You can go home, Ethan said. She nodded and reached for her cardigan. As she walked past him, he noticed something small around Olivia's wrist, a thin red thread bracelet. He frowned. I've seen that before, he said slowly. Marisol instinctively touched her own wrist. The same red thread bracelet rested there. It's from my village, she explained quietly. My mother tied it on me when I was little. It's for protection. And how did one end up on my daughter? Ethan asked. Marisol hesitated. That I put it on her, she admitted. She wouldn't stop crying. You didn't think to ask. She looked up at him then, her eyes filled not with fear, but with something deeper. Sometimes protection doesn't wait for permission, she said. Her words unsettled him. Ethan looked at Olivia again, at the tiny red thread against her soft skin. Suddenly, a memory returned to him. The hospital. The night the twins were born, there had been confusion in the maternity ward. A nurse had apologized for a brief mix-up in the nursery. Only 10 minutes, they had said. Nothing serious, but Ethan had not liked how it felt. He had quietly ordered a DNA test afterward. He had never opened the results. Now, standing in the nursery, looking at the matching bracelets, that forgotten memory no longer felt small. What happened at the hospital? He asked carefully. Marisol's breathing changed. She looked at the sleeping twins, then back at him. I never stopped hearing her cry, she whispered. The sentence hit him harder than anger would have. Downstairs, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway echoed through the house. Victoria was home. Marisol stepped back, fear returning to her posture. Ethan remained still. Because upstairs, in his locked study drawer, there was an envelope he had avoided for 2 years. And for the first time, he felt ready to open it. If the truth inside that envelope matched the fear growing in his chest, then this was not just a mistake in a nursery. It was the beginning of a betrayal that started the night his children were born, but when Ethan finally opens that envelope, he will discover that the woman he trusted most may have stolen more than his peace. She may have stolen a mother's child. Some truths wait quietly in drawers, patient and heavy, knowing the day will come when they can no longer be ignored. And sometimes the most dangerous betrayal is the one a man chooses not to see. Victoria's heels echoed across the marble downstairs, her voice floating lightly as she gave instructions to the house staff. The house returned to its usual rhythm, polished, composed, controlled. But Ethan no longer felt anchored inside it. He remained in the nursery for a long moment after Marisol stepped away, his eyes fixed on a thin red bracelet wrapped around Olivia's tiny wrist. It was such a small thing. Cotton thread. Faded red. Yet it felt louder than anything Victoria had ever worn. Without another word, Ethan left the nursery and walked down the hall toward his study. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, shutting out the rest of the house. The room smelled of leather and cedarwood. Framed awards lined the walls. A crystal decanter rested on the side table, untouched. This was where he made decisions that shaped companies, moved markets, changed lives. But tonight, the decision waiting for him was personal. He moved toward his desk and opened the bottom drawer. For 2 years, the envelope had rested there, sealed, undisturbed, heavy with possibility. He had ordered the DNA test after the hospital confusion, not because he truly believed something was wrong, but because he believed in certainty. Victoria had laughed at the idea, called it unnecessary stress. He had agreed. He had convinced himself that suspicion was an insult to the life they had built. That he picked up the envelope now. His name was typed neatly across the front. For a brief moment, he considered putting it back. Instead, he broke the seal. The paper inside felt ordinary. Too ordinary for what it might contain. His eyes scanned the medical language quickly, trained by years of reading contracts and financial reports. Numbers. Percentages. Genetic markers. Then the line that mattered. Probability of biological maternity, 0%. His chest tightened. He read it again, slower this time. 0.0%. Victoria Caldwell was not the biological mother of Oliver and Olivia. The room felt smaller. He turned the page, his pulse steady but heavy. Comparative sample, Marisol Rivera. Probability of biological maternity, 99.98%. The silence in the study deepened into something physical. Ethan lowered himself slowly into the leather chair behind his desk. He did not shout. He did not throw the papers. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals did not collapse easily. But inside him, something fundamental shifted. He replayed the night of the birth. Victoria had gone into labor 2 weeks early. The hospital had been chaos, nurses moving quickly, machines beeping, voices overlapping. Ethan remembered being asked to step out during part of the procedure due to unexpected complications. He had paced the hallway, staring at the floor tiles, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. Later, a nurse had apologized for a brief mix-up in the nursery. 10 minutes, she had said. A paperwork error. Nothing serious. Victoria had looked exhausted but composed. She had squeezed his hand and told him not to overthink it. He had chosen to trust her. Now, sitting in the quiet study, he understood something that made his stomach turn. This was not a mix-up. This was intentional. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Ethan. Victoria's voice came through the door. Are you hiding from me already? He folded the papers carefully and slipped them back into the envelope before answering. Come in. She entered with the scent of expensive perfume and evening air. Her dress shimmered under the soft study lighting, elegant and perfectly tailored. She looked like a woman who belonged on magazine covers, confident, poised, untouchable. You left the fundraiser without saying goodbye, she said lightly, closing the door behind her. Senator Whitmore asked about you. I had something more important to handle, he replied. Her eyes studied him. Is everything all right? Ethan held her gaze. For years, he had admired her composure. Tonight, he searched it for cracks. The twins were alone for 3 hours, he said evenly. She sighed, moving toward the desk. Ethan, we've discussed this. I cannot be everywhere at once. That's why we hire help. They were crying. Babies cry, she repeated, her tone sharper now. Must we dramatize everything? He stood slowly, placing both hands on the desk. Do you remember the hospital? He asked. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. What about it? The nursery mix-up. She gave a small, dismissive smile. Ethan, that was 2 years ago. Yes, he said quietly. It was. Silence stretched between them. You're not still thinking about that, are you? She asked. His voice lowered. Should I be? Victoria's eyes flickered, just for a second. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But Ethan built his empire on reading the smallest signals. I think, she said carefully, that you're tired. You've been under pressure. And you haven't? He asked. She straightened slightly. What exactly are you implying? He stepped around the desk now, closing the physical distance between them. I'm asking you, he said calmly, if there is anything about that night I should know. Her jaw tightened. No. The answer came too fast. Upstairs, a faint cry echoed through the hallway, Olivia stirring in her sleep. Victoria glanced toward the door, then back at Ethan. Marisol seems very attached to them, she said suddenly. Perhaps too attached. The shift in subject was sharp. Why would you say that? Ethan asked. I've noticed the way she looks at them, Victoria replied coolly. It's inappropriate. The words hung in the air. Inappropriate. Ethan thought of the red bracelet. The tears. The whispered lullaby. If someone were to lie about something like this, Victoria continued softly, it would destroy everything. Our name. Your company. The children's future. The statement felt less like concern and more like warning. Ethan studied her carefully. Why would someone lie? he asked. Victoria's eyes hardened slightly. People want what they don't have. He nodded slowly, as if considering her point. But inside, his certainty was forming. Because the DNA report in his drawer did not lie. And Marisol's tears had not been ambition. They had been grief. Upstairs, the baby cried again, louder this time. Victoria moved toward the door. "I'll ask the nanny to check." The nanny left, Ethan reminded her. She stopped mid-step. For the first time that evening, she looked uncertain. "I'll handle it," he said. He walked past her and into the hallway, heading toward the nursery. Behind him, Victoria remained standing in the study doorway, her posture perfectly straight, but her shadow trembling slightly against the wall. As Ethan climbed the stairs, one truth became clear: this was no longer about suspicion. It was about proof. And tomorrow, he would return to the hospital that delivered his children and ask questions no one expected him to ask. Because if the truth was what he believed it to be, then the woman sleeping peacefully upstairs was not the only one who had secrets, and the empire he built might have been founded on a lie. But when Ethan confronts the hospital staff the next morning, he will discover that the switch in the nursery was not an accident, and someone inside that room was paid to stay silent. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It was a shadow walking beside him. And by morning, Ethan Caldwell was ready to follow it straight into the light. The hospital looked smaller than he remembered. St. Catherine's Medical Center had once felt like a place of celebration, bright corridors, congratulatory smiles, nurses carrying new life wrapped in pastel blankets. But when Ethan stepped through its glass doors the next morning, the building felt colder, clinical, stripped of warmth. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, sharp and impersonal. He did not arrive as a nervous father this time. He arrived as Ethan Caldwell, investor, donor, and board contributor. The receptionist recognized him immediately. Within minutes, he was escorted to a private conference room on the maternity floor. The walls were painted a soft blue, meant to soothe anxious families. Today, the color felt almost ironic. Dr. Harold Bennett entered first, a polite smile stretched across his face. He had delivered the twins 2 years ago. Behind him walked Nurse Carla Jennings, her posture rigid, her eyes avoiding Ethan's. "Mr. Caldwell," Dr. Bennett began warmly. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right with the children?" Ethan remained standing. "That depends," he replied calmly. "On how honest you're willing to be." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I'd like to revisit the night my twins were born," Ethan continued. "Specifically, the nursery mix-up." Dr. Bennett exchanged a brief glance with Nurse Jennings. "As we explained at the time," he said carefully, "there was a minor labeling error. It was corrected immediately." "Immediately?" Ethan asked. "Yes," the doctor confirmed. "Within minutes." "How many minutes?" Ethan pressed. There was a pause. "Approximately 10, Nurse Jennings said softly. Ethan stepped closer to the table. "And during those 10 minutes, my children were placed where?" "In the nursery," she replied. "Alongside other newborns." "Was there another delivery at the same time?" he asked. Dr. Bennett cleared his throat. "Yes. A woman named Marisol Rivera experienced complications and delivered that evening." Ethan watched their faces carefully. "What were those complications?" Nurse Jennings shifted slightly. "Severe bleeding. She was under sedation for part of the delivery." "And her baby?" Ethan asked. There it was, the hesitation. "Unfortunately," Dr. Bennett said slowly, "we informed her that the baby did not survive." Ethan's pulse steadied instead of racing. Calm meant clarity. "You informed her," he repeated. "Did you show her the body?" Silence. Dr. Bennett's jaw tightened. "In cases of trauma, we sometimes advise against immediate viewing." "Answer the question," Ethan said, his voice lower now, controlled but firm. "No," Nurse Jennings admitted quietly. "She was not shown." The room felt heavier. And the babies, Ethan continued, were tagged correctly? Yes, Dr. Bennett said quickly. Of course. Then how, Ethan asked, placing both hands flat on the table, does a mother leave this hospital believing her child is dead, when that child is alive? The words hung in the air like a verdict. Nurse Jennings' eyes filled with something close to panic. Dr. Bennett's composure thinned. Mr. Caldwell, he said carefully, if this is about a personal dispute, I assure you. This is about DNA, Ethan interrupted. He removed the folded report from his jacket and placed it on the table between them. Victoria Caldwell, he said evenly, is not the biological mother of Oliver and Olivia. The silence that followed was no longer professional. It was human. And Marisol Rivera, Ethan added, is. Nurse Jennings' breath caught audibly. Dr. Bennett's face drained of color. That's not possible, he said automatically. It is, Ethan replied. And I want to know how. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of fluorescent lights above them sounded louder than it should have. Finally, Nurse Jennings whispered, we were told it was handled. Ethan's gaze snapped to her. Handled by whom? She looked at Dr. Bennett, fear clear in her expression. Carla, the doctor warned softly. Her voice trembled. There was a call from upstairs. From administration. We were instructed to correct the paperwork. Correct it how? Ethan demanded. To reflect Mrs. Caldwell as the mother of record. The words felt unreal. You're saying, Ethan said slowly, that someone ordered you to switch the babies? No, Dr. Bennett insisted quickly. There was confusion. A labeling issue. The files were updated to avoid legal complications. Legal complications? Ethan's voice hardened. You declared a living baby dead. Nurse Jennings closed her eyes briefly. We were told it was the family's request. Ethan felt the ground shift under him. Which family? He asked. She hesitated. The Caldwell family. The air seemed to leave the room. My wife made that request, he asked. Dr. Bennett did not answer directly. Your wife's father, he said instead, was very involved that evening. Ethan's thoughts sharpened. Charles Whitmore. Victoria's father. Political strategist. Wealthy. Ruthless when necessary. He spoke with administration privately, Dr. Bennett continued. There were concerns about complications, inheritance, public image. Public image, Ethan repeated quietly. Nurse Jennings' voice dropped even lower. We were told the other mother would be compensated. That she would be relocated. That it was, merciful. Ethan's jaw tightened. And was she? He asked. No, she whispered, the truth settled fully now, this was not an accident. It was a transaction. Ethan gathered the report slowly. You will provide me with every document from that night, he said calmly. Every call log. Every administrative change. Mr. Caldwell, Dr. Bennett began. If you refuse, Ethan continued, this hospital will face charges that no board donation can protect you from. His voice was steady. Controlled. Final. He turned and walked toward the door. Mr. Caldwell, Nurse Jennings called softly. He paused. She held her baby for a moment, the nurse said, tears forming in her eyes. Before we took her away for surgery. She kept saying she knew the cry. She said a mother always knows. Ethan felt something tighten painfully in his chest. Outside the hospital, the late morning sun felt harsher than usual. The world continued normally, cars passing, people walking, unaware that a quiet crime had just been exposed. He stood still for a long moment. This was bigger than Victoria, bigger than pride. This was legacy, and someone had tried to rewrite it. As he stepped into his car, his phone vibrated. A message from Victoria. We need to talk. My father is coming over tonight. Ethan stared at the screen. Of course he was. Because if Charles Whitmore had truly orchestrated the switch, then tonight would not be a family dinner. It would be a confrontation between power and truth. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell was not sure which one would win. But when Charles Whitmore walks into the Caldwell estate that evening, he will not deny what happened, he will justify it. And that justification will push Ethan to a breaking point he can no longer control. Some betrayals break a marriage. Others expose the foundation it was built on. That evening, the Caldwell estate looked the same as it always had, calm, polished, untouched by scandal. The dining table was set with crystal glasses and fine china. Soft light reflected off the marble floors. To anyone passing by, it was a picture of stability and wealth. But inside the house, something was shifting. Ethan stood near the fireplace in the living room, his posture straight, his face unreadable. In his pocket rested copies of the hospital records he had demanded that morning. He had not told Victoria what he had learned. Not yet. He wanted to hear what she would say when confronted with silence. First, Victoria entered the room wearing a cream silk dress, her expression composed but watchful. She studied Ethan carefully. "You've been distant all day," she said. "If this is about the hospital, we can talk about it like adults." "Can we?" he asked quietly. Before she could answer, the front door opened. Charles Whitmore walked in without hesitation. He carried himself like a man accustomed to power, shoulders back, chin lifted, silver hair perfectly in place. His presence filled the room before he spoke a word. "Ethan," Charles said warmly, extending a hand. "Victoria tells me you've been digging into old ghosts." Ethan did not shake his hand. "I've been digging into the truth," he replied. Victoria's fingers tightened slightly around the back of a chair. Charles gave a small, controlled smile. "Truth can be complicated." "It shouldn't be," Ethan said. "Not when it comes to children." The room fell quiet. Charles moved toward the bar and poured himself a drink, as if they were discussing business strategy instead of family. "You're a smart man, Ethan," he began calmly. "You understand legacy. You understand reputation. You understand that sometimes difficult decisions protect the greater good." Ethan felt heat rise slowly in his chest. "You're admitting it." Charles did not deny it. "There was confusion that night," he said. "Your wife was in distress. The doctors were unsure if she could carry again. The press would have destroyed her if word got out that she couldn't provide an heir." "An heir?" Ethan repeated, his voice sharpening. "They are not assets. They are the future of your name," Charles corrected smoothly. "And Marisol Rivera was a cleaning staff member with no resources, no influence, no ability to raise children in the world you occupy." Victoria stepped forward. "We didn't steal them," she said quickly. "It was already chaotic. The hospital made mistakes. Daddy only ensured things were stabilized." "Stabilized?" Ethan turned toward her. "You let a mother believe her child was dead." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "She would have struggled. They would have grown up without opportunity. We gave them everything." "You gave them silence," Ethan replied. Charles set his glass down slowly. "Be careful," he said in a lower tone. "This family stands on more than emotion. It stands on structure. On alliances. On protection. If you tear this open, you destroy not only Victoria, but your company, your children's future, your own standing." Ethan looked at the man across from him, a strategist, a protector of image, a man who believed outcomes justified methods. "And what about dignity?" Ethan asked quietly. "What about humanity?" Charles's expression hardened. "Humanity doesn't build empires." "No," Ethan said. "But it keeps them from rotting." The words landed heavily. Victoria's eyes filled with something that looked almost like fear. "Ethan," she whispered, "please don't do this. We can handle this privately. We can compensate her properly. Move her somewhere comfortable." Like you handled it before, he asked. She had no answer. Upstairs, Olivia began to cry. The sound drifted down the staircase, thin but urgent. Oliver followed a second later. The cry was different tonight. Not just discomfort. Distress. Marisol appeared at the edge of the hallway, unsure if she should step forward. She had been putting away linens when the argument began. Now she stood still, hearing every word. Ethan turned toward the staircase. I'll go, Marisol said softly. Victoria's voice cut through the air. No. The command was sharp, instinctive. Marisol stopped. Ethan looked at Victoria carefully. Why not? She's overstepping, Victoria said. She's staff. Marisol lowered her eyes, but her hands trembled. Ethan felt something inside him settle into clarity. He walked toward the staircase and paused beside Marisol. Come with me, he said. Victoria's breath caught. Ethan, but he was already climbing the stairs. In the nursery, the twins were red-faced and crying harder now. Ethan stepped aside, watching carefully. Marisol moved toward the cribs slowly, almost reverently. She picked up Olivia first, whispering softly in Spanish, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Within moments, Olivia's crying softened. Then she reached for Oliver, holding them both close in a way that seemed instinctive, natural, unforced. Ethan watched the shift happen in real time. The babies recognized her. It was not training. It was not routine. It was something deeper. Downstairs, Charles's voice carried upward. You're making an emotional decision, Ethan. That's dangerous. Ethan turned toward the doorway where Victoria now stood, pale and shaken. They know her, he said quietly. Victoria's eyes filled. They know me too. He studied her face. He wanted to believe that love could rewrite what had happened. But love without truth felt hollow now. You built this on fear, he said gently. On the fear of looking weak. On the fear of losing status. I was protecting us, she insisted. You were protecting yourself. The words hurt both of them. In that moment, Ethan understood something clearly. This was no longer about scandal or reputation. It was about restoring something stolen, not just children, but identity. He looked at Marisol holding the twins, her face glowing with quiet relief as their cries faded. Then he looked back at Victoria. I'm filing a legal petition tomorrow, he said calmly. For full investigation and custody review. Victoria's body went still. Charles's footsteps echoed on the stairs behind them. If you do that, he warned, you declare war on this family. Ethan did not raise his voice. It was already declared, he said. The night you took her child. Silence filled the hallway. Because in that moment, there was no turning back. But when the legal battle begins the next morning, Ethan will discover that Victoria has one final secret, and revealing it could change everything he believes about the twins. When a secret is exposed, people either collapse under it, or reveal who they truly are. And Victoria Caldwell was not ready to collapse. By morning, the Caldwell estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like a courtroom waiting for its judge. Lawyers arrived before breakfast. Calls were made behind closed doors. The silence between Ethan and Victoria was colder than anger. Marisol had not returned home that night. Ethan had insisted she stay in the guest suite, away from fear and pressure. She resisted at first, worried about causing more damage, but he had spoken with calm certainty. You've been silenced long enough, he told her. Not anymore. Now she sat near the window of the guest room, watching early light stretch across the manicured lawns. She did not look victorious. She looked terrified. Because truth, she knew, can save you, but it can also cost you everything. Downstairs, Victoria stood in the kitchen with her attorney, Rebecca Sloan, a sharp woman known for protecting powerful families. Papers were spread across the marble island. This can still be contained, Rebecca said quietly. If we argue emotional bonding and established guardianship, the court may hesitate to remove custody. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. They are my children. Rebecca did not respond to that. Instead, she asked, did you know about the hospital paperwork adjustments? Victoria hesitated. That pause was answer enough. Upstairs, Ethan met with his own legal team in the study. His lead attorney, Daniel Harper, reviewed the DNA report carefully. This is strong evidence, Daniel said. But the hospital's involvement complicates things. If this was orchestrated by your father-in-law, it becomes a criminal matter. Ethan nodded. Then let it be criminal. You understand, Daniel continued, this will go public. I know. And your company? Ethan's jaw tightened. If my company cannot survive truth, it doesn't deserve to survive. Those words surprised even him, because for years, he had believed power meant control. Now he understood it meant responsibility. By afternoon, the lawyers requested a private mediation before filing formal charges. They gathered in the Caldwell living room, sunlight pouring through tall windows, lighting up the quiet wealth that once symbolized pride. Victoria sat straight-backed on one end of the room. Ethan stood near the fireplace. Marisol remained seated beside Daniel Harper, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Charles Whitmore entered last. He looked irritated, not defeated. This is unnecessary, he began. We can settle this discreetly. There is nothing discreet about stealing a child, Ethan replied calmly. Charles exhaled slowly. We protected those twins from instability. Marisol finally lifted her eyes. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. You protected your image. The room fell silent. Charles looked at her with cold calculation. You would have struggled. I would have loved them, she answered. The simplicity of her response carried more weight than any argument. Victoria's composure cracked for the first time. Tears slipped down her face. I couldn't lose them, she whispered. After the doctor said I might never carry again. I couldn't face the world empty. Ethan turned toward her slowly. So you made another woman empty instead? Victoria covered her face, shaking. Daniel Harper leaned forward. There is one more detail we need clarified, he said carefully. Mrs. Caldwell, were you aware that Marisol was originally informed her baby had died? Victoria lowered her hands. Yes, she admitted. The word echoed in the high-ceilinged room. Marisol's breath caught. Ethan felt something inside him harden permanently. Victoria continued, her voice fragile now. My father said it would be easier. That she would move on. That grief fades. Grief doesn't fade, Marisol said quietly. It waits. Those words settled into everyone present. Charles stepped forward, his patience thinning. This is emotional manipulation. Ethan, think clearly. The twins know Victoria as their mother. Uprooting them will cause damage. Ethan looked toward the staircase, where faint baby sounds drifted down. They also know her, he said, glancing at Marisol. Charles's expression sharpened. You're willing to gamble their stability for morality? I'm restoring their identity, Ethan replied. Rebecca Sloan, Victoria's attorney, cleared her throat. There is another complication. All eyes turned to her. She opened a folder slowly. Medical records show that one of the twins carries a genetic marker linked to a hereditary condition. Ethan's stomach tightened. What condition? A rare blood disorder, she said. It requires monitoring. He felt the room tilt slightly. Victoria was tested, Rebecca continued carefully. She does not carry the gene. Marisol's face paled. And you're saying, Ethan began. We need Marisol's full medical history immediately, Rebecca said. If the children are biologically hers, she may carry the marker. The truth was expanding. This was no longer only about custody. It was about health. Legacy in the most literal sense. Marisol looked at Ethan, fear in her eyes. If they're sick because of me. They're not sick because of you, Ethan said firmly. They're alive because of you. Charles folded his arms. Now you see why this was complicated. No, Ethan replied. Now I see how deep it goes. The mediation ended without resolution. Legal filings were prepared that evening. As night settled over the estate, Ethan stood alone in the nursery, watching the twins sleep. He thought about blood, about how it connects people in ways that cannot be erased by money or status. He thought about choice. Victoria had chosen fear. Marisol had chosen love. And he was choosing truth. But as he leaned over Olivia's crib, his phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel Harper. We've received hospital security footage from the night of the birth. Ethan's pulse slowed. There was someone else in the room during the switch. He stared at the message. Someone else. Someone who had not yet spoken. And if that person stepped forward, it could either save this family, or destroy what little remained of it. The final truth did not arrive with shouting. It arrived quietly, like a door opening that could never be closed again. The security footage came just after sunrise. Ethan watched it alone in his study, the curtains half drawn, burly light stretching across the hardwood floor. The video was grainy, time-stamped 2 years earlier. The maternity ward hallway appeared calm at first, nurses walking briskly, a cart being pushed, paperwork exchanged. Then the frame shifted to the nursery. 2 bassinets stood side by side. One labeled Caldwell. One labeled Rivera. Ethan's chest tightened. A nurse entered the room, Nurse Carla Jennings. She checked both tags, adjusted blankets, moved quickly. Nothing unusual. Then the door opened again. Charles Whitmore stepped inside. He was younger by 2 years, but the posture was the same, composed, purposeful. He closed the door behind him. The footage had no sound, but it did not need it. Charles approached the bassinets. He looked down at the babies for a long moment. Then, calmly, deliberately, he switched the name tags. Ethan did not blink. He watched the action once. Then again. Then a third time. There was no confusion. No chaos. No accident. It was a choice. When Ethan finally left the study, his face carried no visible rage. It carried something far steadier, finality. Victoria was seated at the dining table, pale and sleepless. Marisol stood near the window, hands clasped, as if bracing for whatever would come next. Charles arrived shortly after, summoned by Ethan's message. We need to end this, Charles said the moment he stepped inside. The press is starting to circle. Ethan placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. The footage rolled silently between them. Victoria covered her mouth as soon as she saw it. Marisol stared without moving, tears sliding down her cheeks before she seemed aware of them. Charles watched himself on the screen. He did not look away. When the video ended, the room remained silent. You see? Ethan said quietly. No confusion. No paperwork error. You made the decision. Charles exhaled slowly. I made the necessary decision. For whom? Ethan asked. For this family. Marisol's voice broke through, soft but steady. You never asked me. Charles looked at her without apology. You would have refused. Yes, she said. Because she was my daughter. The word daughter landed in the room like a bell. Victoria began to cry openly now. I didn't think it would last, she whispered. I thought it was temporary. Daddy said we would fix it later. Later? Ethan repeated. 2 years of a mother grieving her living child. Victoria's shoulders shook. I was afraid. Ethan felt the truth of that. Not excuse, but truth. Fear had driven her. Fear of judgment. Fear of being seen as less than perfect. Fear of losing the image she believed defined her worth. Charles stepped forward again. We can still resolve this quietly. Shared custody. Financial settlement. Protect the children from scandal. Ethan looked at him with calm clarity. The children are already living in scandal, he said. They just don't know it yet. He turned to Marisol. You deserve full recognition as their biological mother, he said. And I will support that legally. Marisol shook her head slightly. I don't want to take them away from stability. You're not taking, Ethan replied. You're reclaiming. Victoria looked up at that word. Reclaiming. I love them, she said weakly. Ethan knelt in front of her chair, his voice gentler now. I know you do. That was the tragedy. Love had been present. But it had been built on a stolen foundation. You can still love them, he continued. But not through a lie. Charles's voice hardened. You're dismantling your own name. No, Ethan answered quietly. I'm rebuilding it. The legal process moved swiftly after the footage surfaced. Criminal charges were filed against Charles Whitmore for coercion and falsification of medical records. The hospital settled publicly, issuing a formal apology to Marisol and acknowledging the deliberate switch. News outlets exploded with the story. Headlines questioned privilege, power, and the cost of reputation. Ethan's company stock dipped briefly.